Steve, if you want to say hello, you can. You are on camera.
Okay. No worries. I was kind of waiting for David to join us here and then we'll get going. All right, there he is.
Steve got a haircut and I let mine grow out.
Well, mine's falling out, so I don't have to cut as many as I used to.
Wow.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. This is another in our OPA series of webinars. Primarily, we've been doing them regarding the Animal Welfare Act regulations. Today, we're going to talk about shipping, some of the changes that we've seen happening. And I want to make it clear that initially, people are experiencing some of these changes, especially shipping. The Delta Airlines are being told the changes are because Delta Airlines needs to comply with new Animal Welfare Act regulations, and that's not quite true. And I'll explain exactly what's going on there because I think there is some confusion. So when David and I started getting some inquiries from some of our OPA members about this issue, we had some members trying to ship birds at Delta, and we're being told various reasons why their shipments were being rejected, and they couldn't continue to ship their birds that way. And they were told it was because of the new Animal Welfare Act regulations. And so that didn't take long to get to myself and David. It didn't quite make sense because the reasons they were telling us are not really in the Animal Welfare Act regulations. And also those regulations aren't being enforced quite yet. So David and I held a meeting with a couple of Delta officials, and I didn't write down their name, Dr. Nelva, and I forget, I can look it up, but
It was Nelva Bryant, who's the head of animal shipments.
Yeah.
And I forget what her assistant's name was. Juan Javares.
There we go. So David and I held a conference call with Juan and Nelva from Delta, as well as Cody Yeager from USDA to get to the bottom of this. And to cut to the chase, basically what we found is that Delta is implementing stricter requirements, which they're allowed to do. So this may have been initially triggered by Delta needing to be compliant with the new Animal Welfare Act regulations, but Delta made their own corporate decision to enact stricter requirements. So really doesn't have anything to do with the Animal Welfare Act, other than that may have been the initial trigger that got Delta to review their requirements. So let me see if I can share this slide. I just threw this together. Let's see. All right, can you see that?
I can, Steve, yes.
You can or no?
Can, yes, can.
Okay, just want to make sure because when I did it, my screen went blank. Okay, so this was the list of requirements being enacted by Delta that they sent to us after we had our phone conference with them. So there were a number of things that are changing. And I won't read all of that there to you. You can read it. But the main things that we're changing is that the containers have to be IATA compliant. So IATA is the International Air Transportation Association, and LAR stands for live animal requirements. So if you're shipping birds on an international airline, you have to comply if you're an IATA member with these regulations. It isn't required technically by law to ship within the United States by these same requirements, but it is fully up to Delta if they decide that's the requirements they want to enact to accept bird shipments on their airlines. They're free to do that, and that's what they've done. So container requirements are one of the bigger ones. I know a lot of shippers use cardboard boxes, things like that, and those are not IATA compliant. So if you go to ship some birds at the Delta Cargo and they reject it, you need to be aware that that is Delta policy. Some shippers have found that if they take cardboard to a different airport, the cargo agents there will let it through. Well, that doesn't mean that that is acceptable Delta policy. It means you're getting away with it. And that cargo facility is not yet up to date, probably, on these new requirements. Delta's a big company. It takes them a while to roll out all this information and get all their cargo centers to be in compliance. So that's one. They also do not allow the shipping of unweaned birds. So all birds must be weaned. So that's the second major change that affects us. And the third major change is that Delta is not allowing any birds to stay overnight in the cargo areas. So if you have a connecting flight with a layover overnight, that shipment will be rejected. Delta is no longer accepting shipments where birds have to stay overnight in a Delta cargo terminal. So all flights, you can have connecting flights, and the flights themselves can be in transit overnight, but the birds can't sit on the ground in the terminals after hours. And interestingly, when we talked to Delta about their new requirements, they told us, well, we need to be familiar with IATA regulations because that's what they're enacting. But then they went on to say, well, but we're also saying that birds can't stay overnight in the terminal, which is a more stringent requirement than IATA itself. And Delta's free to do that. But a lot of the confusion came because there really wasn't any advance notice. As soon as we found out about it, and David and I had our phone call, we did a press release, put this information out there. But again, we mainly want to make it clear that these are Delta policies. And Delta is absolutely free to do that, to make their decisions on how they're going to run their business. So you have to comply. And if you get away with it at one cargo terminal, it doesn't mean that it's okay. It just means you got away with it. So I don't really have any additional information on it, but I know David and I would love to answer any questions or anything like that. So I think at this point, unless you have anything to add, David, we can open it up to any questions that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, Steve, that like you said, this is Delta requirements. There's not really much we can do about it. And I can tell you from the lawyer perspective, I mean, there's not really a lawsuit to be had to force them to change it. You know, best we can do is lobby them to change it. But obviously our conversations with Nelva made it very clear that as long as she's head of live animal shipments at Delta, this is what she's going to go with. I don't think there's any changing it. I'm looking at the questions. There's one that came in from George, but so I think I wanted to answer this. I wanted to say this already when you mentioned the IATA shipping containers. Basically, an IATA compliant shipping container, so everyone understands, is the most basic example of it is basically a pet carrier, like the kinds you would buy from A&E or even at a pet store, with the holes and screen and doors screened so that the birds can't stick their beak or toes through. And the rules do say that there has to be a perch on it and water and food available in it. So, and that sort of falls into what's an IATA approved shipping container. Obviously, the people who ship in plywood boxes with screens, that's going to be IATA compliant. And like I said, a pet container, a pet carrier with screen over the holes and the door will be IATA compliant as well. So.
Let's see. Yeah. What about a perch? Must water container be inside? Yeah. IATA requirements do require a perch. Now, they don't specify how that perch needs to be mounted, so many inches off the ground or anything else. And there are shippers I've seen that literally put a perch across the bottom floor of the container, and that qualifies as a perch apparently. So in many cases, especially when you're shipping ground birds, quail, things like that, they're non-perching birds, and probably having an elevated perch in there is more likely to lead to injury, but that still is a requirement. So putting one directly on the ground or the bottom surface of your shipping container will allow you to meet that requirement without really adding any additional hazard to the birds inside. Any limits on how many birds per container? I believe there are limits. I don't have those off the top of my head. Do you know anything about that, David?
I don't know it off the top of my head. Let me see if I can get it real quick. I do have I have a bar. Let me see. No, I don't know it off the top of my head. I would have to look into it for you.
Yeah, I seem to recall there is some formula about that. Now that I know they don't require one bird per partition or whatever you want to call it. You can have multiple birds in there. Because I know a lot of commercial shippers that do that, shipping budgies and zebra finches, things like that. There are more than one bird, but I don't know what the formula is off the top of my head. We can try to look that up and get back to you. Jacob asks, any word on the Postal Service ending their live adult bird shipping service? No, that's going to be independent from this. Again, USPS, the Postal Service, has to be in compliance with Animal Welfare Act regulations. But again, they can enact their own stricter requirements as well. And my understanding is on the Postal Service, the primary thing that affects us is that they don't allow any citizens at all. Last I heard, you could still ship game birds and doves and things like that, even as adults. But I don't expect any change from the Postal Service regarding shipping exotics like parrots.
Yeah, I don't expect either. I think we have to see how they respond to the USDA regulations, if they can meet them for game birds and chickens. But people who send green cheeks in USPS, you're not supposed to have been doing that, and it's the same. You still can't do it. Nothing's changed on that end. It's continue to ship with USPS parrots at your own risk.
Yeah, Jacob is also asking, is Delta requiring shippers to be USDA licensed? Well, yes, if you're a commercial shipper, you need to be USDA licensed. How Delta is going to handle this issue, we didn't discuss this on our phone call, but it's an interesting one because if you're a de minimis shipper, in other words, you ship, less than 8 large birds a year, you don't have to be USDA licensed. So will Delta then accept your shipment? That's a good question. Delta technically needs to have your USDA license if you're shipping more than the USDA de minimis. Let's see. Go ahead.
Steve, yeah, I got the number of birds per crate rule.
Okay.
So this is not going to be clear. I'm just warning you, but I'll tell you what it says. A captive bred bird needs a minimum of 7 centimeters, which is 2 3/4 inches perch space per bird in the box, and a maximum number of birds per container or compartment of a container is 35. So I don't really know how they would apply that. That's for small birds. For large parrots, it's 25% greater. So the takeaway, less than 35 is what the rule is. And make sure there's a perch in there. I don't really get how they would apply that, in any kind of setting, but that's basically the rule, less than 35.
All right, George. George says he doesn't mean to be rude. George, you're not rude. It's a fair question. He says we need a white paper on all the rules, which is something that we have discussed. OPA wants to put something like that out. It'll take a little bit of time. We're volunteers. But yeah, we want to be helpful to you. So that is something we want to do. You have something to add regarding that, David?
Yeah, we are. I'm behind on getting it out. And honestly, at this point, I'll probably wait until we get some practical experience to get finalized, because that way I can incorporate some practical experience into it. But we are working on it. As to the shipping side, we can send around what Delta has given us, although, as we see with the number of birds per crate rule, some of this stuff isn't particularly clear on its face. And so, I think there's something to be said, Steve, and you can have a different opinion than me, but also just act reasonably. If you're trying to ship a crate and the birds are crawling on top of each other, you probably need 2 crates. I think that's a reason. That's kind of, you just need to operate reasonably here, and you'll avoid some of the problems with Delta.
Yeah. Let's see, another question here. Does UPS ship live birds? No, UPS does not ship live birds. None at all. United Parcel Service. The post office does, but it's limited to game birds, doves, things like that. Let's see here. Delta's instructions requires an IATA license if you ship internationally. Yeah. Well, for international, which is generally not a big issue for what we're talking about domestic shipping here. International is a whole other ball game. You're going to need to get a broker involved and everything else.
International is definitely different. Going back to will you need a license to ship with Delta? I expect there will probably be somewhere on that form that they put out that says if you're a USDA shipper, if you're USDA licensed, put your USDA license number. But I also don't think they're going to require it from everybody, because they're going to know that there's going to be some non-USDA shippers. But we have to see. We have to see how they treat that once everybody kicks into compliance in August.
Yeah, and that's a lot of it. As David said earlier, that we would like to put out kind of some shipping guidelines for our membership. And some of that, unfortunately, we have to kind of wait and see how it all plays out. We don't want to put a ton of effort into something that we end up having to rewrite in a month or two, which is why we're doing these webinars. This is kind of the most up-to-date information we have. So we're trying to get that out to you with this format so we can answer your questions, hopefully live. And also, for David and I, it's an opportunity to hear, your perspective and what we may not have thought of that we need to investigate. So yeah, please, if you have any questions, put them down there. What's this? George is saying you have a year's worth of birds waiting to be sold. Yeah, the market's a little soft right now, but people are still out there shipping. And George will volunteer to help put together that white paper too. All right, we'll take a volunteer anytime we get one.
Yeah.
So thanks, George.
George has asked about the ground temperature too.
Oh yeah.
So the ground temperature rules, Steve, I don't know what your experience you have with it. The ground temperature rules I know are enforced, but I know people ship around them all the time, and I don't think that's one that Delta enforces very strictly. I'm not sure how that one actually is being applied.
Yeah, and a lot of times, if they're going to a cargo facility that's indoors and air conditioned, they'll be much, much looser on that requirement. But if you're shipping to a small airport that's just in an open warehouse with no climate control, they'll be stricter on that. But I haven't run into that, with them rejecting a shipment unless it's during a pretty bad heat wave. So we're headed into the summer right now, and they will start rejecting shipments based upon that. But it hasn't been a huge issue so far.
Yeah, and it wasn't in the list of stuff that Nelva pointed out to us. So
right.
I don't think it's particularly high up on the priority list. So
right.
George, why don't you tell us why you got can you give us some information about why you got your shipment rejected? Maybe we can address it.
OPA.
Hi, George.
Okay, now you can hear me. I called Delta several times trying to ship yesterday, and they were, excuse me, 1 second. I have Amazons in the background.
I could tell.
They rejected me because they said the ground temperature in Atlanta was over 80 degrees, and they would not transship through Atlanta to Douglas, to Charlotte.
Okay, well, that's not something I've encountered yet, 80 degrees.
Yeah, no, I haven't encountered that either yet because, Miami's always over 80 degrees.
Right.
Well, the problem is you don't want to load the birds up in a cage and haul them over to the airport just to be told that.
Understood, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why we've heard from some of our members. That's exactly what's happened. So yeah, I think I'll send an email out to Nelva for clarification on that.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know what I find out. But 80 degrees would be a tough one. And I know Atlanta's a big airport. That's climate controlled and everything, so I wouldn't think that's an issue. But I'll ask for clarification. I'll let you know what we find out.
Yeah.
Well, I had to send the lady her money back. So, because I don't keep money if I can't ship.
Yep.
Yeah. No, George, we'll have to look into that for you because that's new for me. I don't ship often, but I've shipped in the dead of summer in Miami, and I've never had that. I've never had a shipment rejected for that. And likewise, all my shipments everything out of Miami goes through Atlanta. So.
George, was your connecting flight? Did it have an overnight layover at all, or?
Well, I didn't try to do that right now. I wanted to, because the lady had some work issues. She had to pick the bird up between like 1 in the afternoon and 7 at night. So I tried to pick the flights that would get the bird there after 1 o'clock and before they closed.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so you would have been able to get it to Atlanta, say in the morning, and then it would have left same day for Charlotte.
yeah, I might have been able to work around it. She had some very specific work requirements that she wanted to pick up. So I tried to ship it early in the morning and then get it to Charlotte by the afternoon. But I talked to the woman on Delta, and she said they were not shipping anything through air freight live animals with the heat the way it was in the South right now. So I don't know. I just don't like getting hung up, if I loaded the bird.
Understood, yeah. I would, there are some areas that are having some extreme heat waves, and that could have been the concern. I'm wondering if you were shipping from California in the morning, it seems to me if it was going to arrive in Charlotte the afternoon, there's got to be an overnight involved there, I'm wondering, because by the time you get from here to Atlanta, with the time difference and 5-hour flight, you're almost guaranteed to have an overnight in there. So I'm wondering if that might have been the issue as well. But we'll check on that and see if there are some temperature restrictions on you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think Buddy has a question, or maybe not.
Unless it's part of these changes, Delta, when you make the reservation, if you'll say it's not a pet, they waive all temperature restrictions. Because I've had shipments, they tried to refuse them a couple of times because of this, and day-old chicks, Delta will even exempt the temperature restrictions for them if you declare it as commercial or non-pet or whatever it is.
Yeah, commercial. Thanks, buddy. I have heard that, and that could be the distinction as well.
Yeah, I've had it happen several times, and one cargo manager I know well, and she's always helped me. I had to get the information off the Delta website and send it to her in an email, and she's like, "I learned a new one today," and she's been doing it for 20 years. So anyway.
Okay. Well, that's that. George, maybe try that. Insist that it's a non-pet shipment, and maybe that will solve your problem. Because I have heard that too, that they will waive temperature requirements for non-pets if it's commercial shipments.
They call them a commercial shipment at that point. Yeah. All right, do we have any other questions coming in? Let's take a look here. I don't see any. All righty, so I guess we'll have a quick meeting today. How about that?
Yeah.
Anything you got to add there, David?
No, I think I would just restate, be reasonable with your shipments, and I think for the most part, there's some stupid rules in there, but I mean, for the most part, it's just a be reasonable thing, and I think you'll still keep slipping them through. But other than that, I mean, be prepared that if you're shipping a bird that doesn't look weaned, you might have a problem. If you're trying to ship with an overnight stay in a warehouse, that's going to be a problem. And if you're trying to ship in something that isn't a pet carrier or a wooden crate, you're going to have a problem. I think that's basically it. Other than that, it's it is what it is. It's shipping.
There it is. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll see you all in Dallas into September. I'll put a plug in for the AFA, ASA, OPA combined conference. Something we're doing a little differently this time around. Going to experiment, see if we can get some good positive energy going. All of our organizations, we all work together. Even if it may not seem like it, we always have worked together, and we want to show that through this conference this year. So please check that out. It's all up on the AFA and the ASA website. I think it's on the OPA website too.
Yeah.
So go ahead and get on there and register. We'd love to see you in person down there.
Are you talking, Steve?
No.
No, you don't have a lecture this year?
Oh, am I talking? Yes, I am. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I didn't hear you literally talking. I said, what are you talking about at the AFA conference this year?
I'm going to do, well, I don't have a title for my talk yet, but I'm going to talk about the business side of running a commercial bird farm.
Very
So
good.
I'm going to go into the finances, the accounting, some basic business strategies and marketing that all center around agriculture and bird farms.
Are you going to give us your PPB, your price per bird? What your margin is?
No, we can't talk about that. That would be price fixing. That's illegal. You know that.
Yeah, no. And obviously I'll be talking on the USDA regulations, which by then we'll have a good picture of what it looks like and I'll probably walk somebody through how to apply for your license. So.
Yeah, I haven't even started mine yet. I'm hoping to get my application going in July and get it submitted from there. But
yeah, no, I sent Cody an email today to see if there was any update on when the bird specific forms are going to come out, because that's I was gonna do it on the other forms like Cody said, but they're just confusing when it's asking you for has your animal gotten a tuberculosis inoculation.
right.
Let's just see what they want on the bird form. So hopefully Cody will tell us that the bird forms are coming out in the next week or two. I'm expecting.
All right, very good. Well, we'll wrap it up there then, I think. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on this quick conference. And we'll let you know when we have our next webinar, and send us emails and questions in between.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Yep. Sorry, I was checking them to see if we didn't have any other messages on the OPA email, but no, we don't. So thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care.